Good morning, everyone. It's almost afternoon. We are here in this fourth session of the doctorate seminar of the research grants by the European Charles V Award, Angela Merkel, on the fortune of being united, guaranteeing and strengthening European cohesion. We have this morning that we are devoting on how to approach Europe to citizens. It's a great challenge. We have been discussing this for 30 years here between these walls. Let's try to reach a conclusion and let's address one of the problems that we have nowadays: fake news, disinformation, and Rocío Sánchez will be in charge of introducing her work. The panel is going to be introduced by Professor Jacques Monnet, a chair, Jean Monnet chair from the Sorbonne University in Paris. He's regular here in the Yuste Foundation. Professor, you have the floor.
So it is the third paper of this morning, and all the three are really very well connected, especially the last two papers, certainly. And with the presentation of Rocío Sánchez del Vas, we are confronted to a growing influence of fake news in the political and society, and it's a problem for us because it's a problem for political life, but also for some important impact. There are important impact in international policies, in economical policies, etc. Your field is communication and journalism, and you are directly confronted to this subject, but also you decided to develop a thesis 2 years ago, and you have, I think, quite a practical ability in the subject, and also a theoretical one. So I think we will have an interesting discussion.
Buenos días a todos.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much, Enrique, for your kind presentation. I would like to start by using these first minutes to thank the Yuste Foundation for having granted me this prestigious scholarship. I am deeply grateful. I want to thank the organizers of the seminar that allowed us to have this place of encounter, reflection, and research with magnificent panelists, colleagues, and people who, as my friends have said, have become an essential part of this seminar. I obviously want to thank the interpreters who are taking our voices far beyond, and technicians who help us go beyond our physical presence. I would like to start my presentation by referring to Franco Panchera's words. He opened this seminar, and he said during the first day that disinformation is a threat for the health of our systems, our democracies. And this is the cornerstone of what I will refer to here. The thesis project that I'm introducing under the title of European Verification and Democratic Cohesion, the role of fact-checking in EU governance against disinformation. This is part of my thesis project, and I am doing it thanks to the FPU grant in the University Carlos III, and I'm also developing it under the Jean Monnet chair. My colleague Raquel is also under the same framework. The research question that my presentation will revolve around is the following. How does the European Union fight disinformation, and what is the role of fact checkers in digital European governance? I don't know if the time should be already running so that I can make sure that I don't exceed the time that I have. How am I going to answer this question? I will carry out a descriptive analysis of the evolution and consolidation of the strategies fostered by the European Union to face the disinformation phenomenon. More specifically, I will make an emphasis on the institutional promotion of the fact-checking institutions, focusing on the European fact-checking standard network. Is my case study, and I will elaborate on it later on. I will start talking about the vision that I have. As Professor Enrique said, I'm a journalist. So the approach to this field of knowledge comes from media. And what is my research methodology? What is the methodology that my project is based on? I started with a deep documentary analysis of the initiatives and regulations by the EU to face disinformation. I did a literature review and I considered the case study that I just mentioned. I like to start with facts, and I want to refer to the Eurobarometer that Raquel was mentioning. 82% of European citizens believe that the existence of news or information that distort reality or fake news is a problem for democracy. Also, 77% of these citizens believe that this is a problem for their own country. We are in a geopolitical situation marked by wars, the ascent of populism, and social polarization. This is marking our democracies. Technological development is strongly connected to these institutional processes. Digital tools facilitate these uh, grounds, these nurturing grounds, and social media have become a source of disinformation, not only for European citizens, but also for citizens on a global level. The thing is that social media, through their algorithms, the power of algorithms that Carlos Barroso will talk about, the echo chambers that have been mentioned, or filter bubbles, all of this pushes us to stay in our own cave where we just get the information that we want to hear about because of these cognitive biases that my colleague Felipe Nuño was mentioning. We are currently at a time where media are losing the trust of the audience, and social media have no filter and help us trust disinformation. This disinformation can travel 6 times faster than real situation because of what? Because of that polarization, because we get nervous and we get hyper when you hear some information that we believe responds to a concern we have, and we share it without even knowing whether it's true or not. I like to refer to disinformation waves. The first wave of disinformation had very democratic consequences. Brexit 2016, the ascent of Trump to the White House. Electoral elections are moments when disinformation get the perfect breeding grounds. It's very easy to use lies to destabilize our democracies. The second wave of disinformation, we all remember the COVID pandemic, and we were able to see how social media were, in a way, our tool to get information. We were getting lots of disinformation, drink bleach to kill the germ. And there were other conspiracy theories. Science could not respond as fast as our eagerness for information grew. So we believed things and we were aware of how these platforms, digital platforms, how much they can grow and how viral they are. People think, some researchers think that democratic societies are more subject to this disinformation, and the European Union is aware of how dangerous disinformation is to our democracies. So the European Union called all hands on deck. So what is the European Union? What is the European Union doing to face the situation? Well, the response came after the Crimea invasion in 2014. So it promoted EU action against Russian disinformation. In 2015, the 28 EU leaders met in Brussels and decided counter this Russian propaganda. That's when they created the East Stratcom working group. and the EU versus disinformation was the poster child of this. So in 2016, the European Commission and Federica Mogherini adopted the common framework in the fight against hybrid threats. The main purpose was to improve awareness and the exchange of information between member states, reinforce resilience in key areas like cybersecurity, establish procedures to prevent, respond, and recover in the face of crisis, and intensify cooperation between the EU, NATO, and other organizations. After this, the high-level group experts in the field of fake news and disinformation was created in 2018. It included social media experts, businesses, fact checkers, etc. And they wrote a report that would be of utmost importance, which is fake news online disinformation, that defined and proposed strategies to fake disinformation. The main areas, focus areas, were transparency, media literacy, empowering users and journalists, sustainability of the media environment, and of course, assessment of solutions against disinformation. And here is when fact checkers started having a major role, not protagonists, but they started having an important role. Then in 2010, there was another proposal, a systemic proposal, the action plan against disinformation. It included organizers, civil society organizations, fact checkers, and digital platforms. There were 10 pillars organized in 10 actions, sorry, organized in 4 pillars. The European Union wanted to bring together different stakeholders to face disinformation. It is very important that the EU does not consider that it is only the institution's responsibility. There is a series of stakeholders that wanted to draw support from. So this happened in 2018. And as a response to this geopolitical scenario, the EU started working. And I will mention what the different environments or actions have been. On the one hand, one of the pillars was the reinforcement of the responsibility of online platform. Online platforms are the ones that benefit from disinformation because disinformation uh, travels much faster than real information. This gets many more clicks, and if you have more clicks, you have more economic benefit. As the outcome of this group of experts, what happened was that a good practices code was created in 2018. This good practices code was renewed and expanded. 16, there were 16 entities that signed it, and there were 21 commitments. And some of the commitments were ad collocation, ad allocation analysis, transparency in um, policy and theme publicity, services integrity. The code was assessed in 2020 and 2021. Some deficiencies were corrected in 2022. Reinforced good practices code was passed. This is very interesting as this was the first co-regulating instrument for online platforms and search engines. There were 44 commitments and 128 specific measures in key areas. In February this year, the Good Practices Code turned into a Good Practices Code in the field of disinformation, and this informs the um, the uh, the further another further initiative that is a framework to face obligations of the services um, Digital Services Act. So what are the fields of action? We have the monetization of disinformation, transparency of political and theme advertisement, guaranteeing the integrity of services, um, providing skills to the users who are participating in these networks, providing the skills to researchers, because researchers also have a voice when it comes to establishing how we fight disinformation, empowering the fact-checking community. We are seeing how codes focus on fact checkers, establishing a transparent center, reinforcing the following framework, cooperation during elections, because in European elections and in all elections, this is when most um, information manipulation happens, and this has consequences in democracy. And of course, number 10 of this Digital Services Act involves assessing this initiative. So, what is this Digital Services Act? It is implemented together with the Digital Markets Law. The purpose is that whatever is illegal offline should be illegal online, because of course it's really obvious what's illegal offline. But how can we regulate things that are illegal offline? These platforms offer services, and there are numbers of users, categories. Um, there are platforms that are very large and have more responsibility, and then we have large scale um, search engines like Google. They have stricter obligations, and here is when we have to think about the code of conduct in the field of disinformation, because these platforms, these search engines, may uh, adhere to this code of conduct to respond to obligations, because lack of compliance may involve uh, sanctions of 6% of the income. The Digital Services Act doesn't regulate disinformation only if the content is illegal, uh, in agreement with the principle of freedom of expression. Another strategy within the reinforcement of the responsibility of online platforms carried out by the EU is the first law of AI. It became it became valid in on August 2024, and it's an approach based on the risk. The classification of obligations is relative to the dangers to security that have to do with these systems. The second um, the second aspect has to do with um, the European Democracy Plan. In 2020, a plan was adopted, a plan with the purpose of promoting free and fair elections, reinforcing the freedom of media, as Raquel was saying, fighting against disinformation. In 2022, there was a project of defense of the democracy that was based on the 2020 plan that was aimed at facing the threats of fake information. This plan is fundamental for the development of the Action Plan for Democracy in Spain that was under debate at the beginning of this year.
On the other hand, we have the regulation and transparency and segmentation of political publicity, the focus on public publicity campaigns during the elections, for example, ad segmentation, only explicitly accepted advertisement, or, for example, foreign publicity. Advertisers from third countries cannot publicly advertise 3 months before the elections. And then cybersecurity. A little before the 2024 elections, there was a compendium on the protection of the integrity of elections from the perspective of cybersecurity. This compendium created a list of current threats for the elections, a list of revised cases, a list of best practices in cybersecurity, and an evaluation of potential threats related to the emerging threats. The third pillar is the fight against foreign interferences and cyber attacks. And this is the EU versus Disinfo project from 2015. That was the first European Union action against the Russian interferences through digital literacy. Carlos Barroso will talk about it later. For example, the identification of recurring topics, tactics, techniques based on the fact-checking principle. And now, faced with hybrid threats, military and non-military techniques to exploit the vulnerability of countries and societies, there are several initiatives. For example, the fast responders, a global action framework, especially in election period, such as the one implemented by the Council on Political Response to Crisis. We have to say that the European Union used unprecedented methods against the Russian disinformation methods after the invasion of the Ukraine. For example, the suspension of licenses for the radio dissemination services coming from Russia. For example, Sputnik Radio and subsidiaries, and Russia Today and subsidiaries. And then the fourth pillar, the development of the social resiliency faced with the manipulation of the disinformation. This is one of the big pillars of the European Union against the misinformation strategies or the manipulation strategies. The regulation is very interesting, but we need citizens that are really aware of the vulnerabilities of the social media, that can identify false news, fake news. That way, the society will be fairer and freer. That is the vaccine against misinformation, because it immunizes the society. So it tries to raise awareness by facilitating strategies and resources to fight against misinformation. And of course, we need educators, teachers that provide people with tools and strategies, especially for the youth, since they are more vulnerable to these strategies, so that they can recognize and stop them. And since I am a journalist, I will try to focus my attention in the protection of journalists and the pluralism of the media, because the European Union is also including in the fight against misinformation. It includes the focus on quality. As Raquel said, there is the EMFA, the European Regulation on the Freedom of the Media. We need plural media, because that way we can get information about several points of view. That guarantees democratic quality. On the other hand, it also facilitates the exercise of the activity of the communication media in the internal market. It removes trans-border obstacles, and it will prevent the interference of undue pressures. And it will come into force it came into force in May 2024. It will become fully effective in May 2026. It is true that journalists face pressures. They are called SLAG, strategic demands against the public participation. So the journalists are limited in their work. And they are prevented from doing their work. And that's why we need the anti-SLAP directive that was launched in 2022 in order to reinforce the protection of journalists and human rights defendants against the strategic demands against the public participation. That is called SLAP. And then the sixth section is the fact-checking support, verification support. This is precisely my field of study in my PhD, because the European Union is starting to incorporate fact checkers as key actors. But if you don't work in communication, you don't know who a fact checker is, what they do. That's why I will make a summary. Fact checking is a professional practice born in traditional journalism, made by journalists or professionals coming from other fields that debunk myths and fake news that make it to the internet. They also challenge the political statements made in the public arena. And many authors call it verification journalism and make it into a different category. It watches journalism. It's called the watchdog effect. Through this practice, information is verified and made accessible to all citizens. However, fact-checking is a young field of research. It's under expansion, and it is now being considered as something apart from the rest of journalism. We need more codes, we need more fact checkers, so that we can legitimize the fact checking sector. And the European Union is not just focusing on the journalists, but also all fact checkers under a different category. So I like to see the European Union considering fact checkers as something different from the journalists. Most verification organizations are looking to forge alliances to create meta organizations that unify a series of standards and best journalistic practices through an ethical code for the territory they work in. The consolidation of the fact checking in support of these practices can be seen in the International Fact Checking Network in the United States or globally, and the European Fact Checking Standard Network. These associations represent the fact checking societies and they promote the use of those standards. The European Union is actively integrating fact checkers within the strategy by promoting the creation of the FCSN, the EFCSN. The EFCSN is a nonprofit organization grouping European fact-checking organizations, more than 50 of them. They engage, they promise to provide only accurate, ethical, and unbiased information. And they have to work in a country of the Council of Europe or Kosovo or Belarus or Russia, and they have to have a proven record of integrity and responsibility. They promise to defend the principles of freedom of speech. They facilitate public access to data and information that is verified and reliable. They educate the society in how to assess the truthfulness of the information. And they have this motto that you can see on the screen. This is the way for your voice to be heard. So through these discussions, we promote changes. And I will give you examples of fact checkers in Spain. Maybe you've heard about Neutral Company or Maldita Foundation. They exist as independent foundations or companies, but also some traditional media are creating special fact checkers teams. For example, EFE Verifica. They disseminate verified information and they also verify or challenge the misinformation that is disseminated in the digital arena. This is a renewal of a traditional profession and they are adapting to the current situation and the current needs. So when I hear someone say journalism is dead, I disagree. Journalism is more alive than ever, as you can see or not in the presentation. So these discussions in the EFCSN, maybe I need to go back to my presentation. The fight against misinformation needs to be more efficient and fact checkers should be adequately retributed for their work. You remember the precariousness both in the field of journalism and the fact-checking field is a problem for our democracies. I want to go back to my screen. Okay, how was it born? It was born from a European project, a call for proposals called Integrity of Social Media by the European Commission in 2021, whose objective was to create a professional integrity code for fact checkers. So the European Union was focusing on fact checkers again. The founding consortium was led by Maldita.es in Spain. I am very happy because in Spain we have many fact checkers networks in this consortium. So Spain is one of the leaders, one of the leading countries in fact checking. It was implemented between 2022 and 2023, so it was funded by the European Commission. Something I find especially relevant in these verification institutions is that they collaborate with one another. There is competition or competitiveness among them. But they also collaborate. They share resources, they share information, they share projects, thematic projects, for example, for specific situations. I will give you an example. Elections 24 Tech was a project created by the EFCSN that aimed at creating a database for fact checkers throughout Spain so that they could debunk myths and misinformation disseminated in the running for the elections to the parliament in 2024. They joined efforts, and that database was a real success because we researchers could have a premium access to the data, work with them, and identify the most relevant or most recurring topics. This is very interesting so that we can see the most widely disseminated topics, the groups they attack. It was in several languages. You could filter out per country, per party, per topic. We also have fact crisis. It's about misinformation on climate change. This is linked to Felipe Núñez's presentation. It's composed of 21 member organizations of the EFCSN, plus academic and technological partners. It was launched in May 2024. In March 2025, the Euroclimate Check database was launched, and there is a united platform for narrative verification about climate change in 15 countries. And this is the result of the cooperation between many actors. It also includes next generation artificial intelligence tools and expert resources in the scientific community. The European Union hasn't only funded the EFCSN, but other initiatives. For instance, we have the European Observatory on Digital Media, the EDMO. It's a multidisciplinary community, academics, universities, etc., to provide us with tools to fight against misinformation. You can segment by countries, you can segment by topic, and they publish a monthly report. They also organize key activities. For example, they manage a safe platform for academic analysis and public awareness raising. They organize training and dissemination courses on disinformation. They coordinate independent activities for fact-checking in Europe, and they also promote academic research on misinformation in Europe. In May 2024, they created research European centers on digital media at a national and regional levels. This is a recent initiative, another recent initiative on the occasion of the Fact-Checking Day. On April the 1st, 2024, the European Commission launched a call for proposals for 5 million euros to reinforce the European network on fact-checking. The aim was to enlarge the operational capacity of the fact-checkers in all member states and all the official languages of the EU to protect fact-checkers against harassment, because like journalists, they have to face many attacks. We saw it during the COVID pandemic. Fact checkers were constantly under attack. They were constantly debunking myths that we tended to believe they are the subject of hate. And this is why these initiatives want to curb that problem. They also want to create a common fact-checking repository, and they want to reinforce the response capacity against disinformation. It's not only for entities that are part of the European Union, but also for candidate countries, countries that are that are candidates to adhesion, or neighboring countries. And this is a key program. This is an open call for proposals. We'll see who wins it. But I am seeing that the collaboration networks make the fact-checking organizations not to feel alone, because there is a media organization that represents them all, that give them some voice and some kind of political position. On the other hand, one of the results of my research is that fact checkers feel part of the consultation processes for the regulations that I just explained. They are part of the ethics code, not just because they are signatories, but because they're one of the solutions used to curb the misinformation. So it's like a double side. I sign this measure, but I am also consulted about it, such as, for example, the EFCSN. They want to position themselves into the European Union. The EFCSN is a very democratic body. They elect their government bodies within the members, among the members, and this is the type of citizen participation that we're looking for. So it all shows a real interest by the European Union when it comes to promoting the fact-checking organizations as part of this strategy against disinformation. They are key actors to it. I'm speaking too fast, and I know it's too bad for the interpreters, but I just want to say that the fight against misinformation is one of the EU's priorities. It uses a solid theoretical or regulatory framework. It became solid. It was especially evident, or it became obvious before the election and in the previous term. So the European Union is at the avant-garde of this fight against the misinformation, and I hope it will have a Brussels effect for those countries that are outside of the scope of the European Union. The transnational nature and the changing nature of this threat is recognized, and that's why it needs coordinated and adaptable solutions. I'd like to repeat the motto of this doctoral seminar, the fortune of being united, because this is something the EU has made. It's a comprehensive approach. It uses innovative regulation, the co-responsibility or shared responsibility of the digital actors. It promotes the resiliency of the institutions, media literacy, protection of the journalists, media pluralism, and of course, support to the fact checkers. The only way to find a real solution is the collaboration between all these key players. So that's why I repeat the fortune of being united. This multidimensional approach makes the Union a worldwide example in the fight against disinformation. We need to guarantee a plural, reliable, and quality information ecosystem. Let's not forget the role of the press and the journalists if we are to guarantee democratic quality, as Raquel said. We need media literacy, that it will be the long-term solution. And the role of teachers. We European citizens need to be aware of how we should receive the information, how to get informed. We have many channels, we have socials, we have the official channels or of the European Union or the official channels of the traditional media. We have the responsibility to understand how we should get this information, but we also need strategies that should be promoted by larger institutions. That way, we will be reinforcing democratic cohesion and the solidity of the European project against the disinformation, which, as we have seen, is a real problem and a threat to us.
Is it going now? Yes? Well, I like much your paper, and I read the summary you gave us, and it's really a fascinating subject. And I think you have to write your thesis, not taking too many years, published a book, and the book will have some success. It's a case very different, the case we spoke just before, because it's a subject of public opinion in Europe is already convinced of the importance, already. So I think the problem of political communication is not only a problem of institution, it's also a problem of subject and capacity of decision. And here, what I see in your problem, it's you speak about danger for democracy, but it's a danger for democratic states, or not for democracy only. Disinformation impacts political life, but disinformation can impact public health. Disinformation can impact security of individuals. Disinformation can impact national and European security. It's a multi-level subject, and I think you are really confronted with a very crucial problem. The problem, so, you know, when you present your chronology with, I don't remember, but Brexit, COVID, and conflict in Europe, you say you have political, health, security, everything. So it's a multi-level and a very differential subject. Also, when you explain this and the case you take, the problem for me is to know who has to verify and who has and where must be the response. Because if you verify there is a disinformation about health, you have to know the origin, you have to know what is the subject, and what you have to know what you have to do and what you have to tell. It's the same for every subject. So we have a problem for Europe, you have a problem at different scales, but you have a problem of about different subjects. So you have a general problem that looks like more a network. So the response must be a network. And the response must be accumulation of competence, organizing network at different levels, and also able to verify facts, but also to verify facts very quickly. It's fast. and not only facts strategy. In some cases, you have to be able to answer in a few minutes or in few hours. So you have to make to think about a sort of networks of competence and of institution able to coordinate and to give to citizens in Europe, it is our subject, a very quick answer. And sometimes very quick directives. You go in your cellar, you close the door and you wait. We will inform you in a few minutes. So that's really a very important question. Europe can be submitted to that kind of general hybrid attacks, and that is really the question. I had one or two others. Yes, you know. No, I prefer to leave the debate. We'll go back. One or two other problems.
Hello? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Enrique, for your feedback to my presentation. I am absolutely in favor of what you've said. The disinformation is a multidimensional risk for our democracy and is about networks of for facing this problem in a multi-level way. I consider that this speed is absolutely important when verifying this information, because the virality is absolutely outstanding. And this is one of the problems of the fact checkers, because for verifying something, it requires time. And if we don't have any time, there is time for mistakes. So I think it's positive to take a little bit of time, but also is very positive to have this connection and interconnection between European institutions and fact checkers, because I'm very concerned that the European Parliament, the offices in Spain and other countries contribute a lot with fact checkers that could guarantee more speed. But yeah, that's the problem. But if we have a lot of speed, maybe we can commit mistakes.
Yes, but you know, in the past, when a politician was attacked, for instance, when disinformation developed about some institution, in the papers, it was possible to have the right to response. But nobody reads the response, generally. You know, the papers publish the response in page 4, and, you know, in a little corner of the page, and nobody reads it. So it's really a problem of capacity to answer very fast. So we have to distinguish between the nature of the disinformation, and according to the nature, you have to be able to be very fast or take more time. And if you have to be very fast, you have the principe de précaution sometimes. You know, I can pay some officine to write a paper against a medicament, you know? Well, it's true or not, is to spend 2-3 weeks to decide and discuss. You can't people dead or off, you know. So it is at the very center of our present life.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I don't know if you have any question.
Buenos días, yo soy Yolanda de la Universidad.
Good morning. My name is Yolanda from the University of Castilla-La Mancha, and I have three comments. First, congratulations. Second, I have a question, and third, I have a recommendation. Let's start with the important thing. Congratulations for your presentation. I think we were all absolutely in awe, and I am absolutely alien to this topic. I understood everything, and I was um, in rapture. So congratulations. So I have something to tell you and Raquel. Your theses are incredibly necessary. I'm a constitutional law teacher. I teach in the first year. I tell my students about parliamentary role. My students know who Pedro Sánchez is because of memes. They don't know what a parliament is. My students don't know what a political party is. And this is common. We're talking about law students who are supposed to have a penchant towards these topics. So imagine the society as a whole, people who have never set foot on a law school. And I always say that media are the first teachers in my subject, parliamentary law. So that's why your role is so important. And it is precisely because of this that in my class, when I finish a topic, we always go over how this is dealt with in the media and we see where the failures are. And usually we realize that our language is not like journalists are not familiar with our specific language. So disinformation in the institutional level is could be solved when someone who is familiar with the institutions studies a question and says, well, this is inexact or this is how this should be addressed. This is my question. In these fact checking companies, who trains these people who work there? Is it just people from the field of communication or is it more cross cutting? Because, for example, in the field of law, problems could be solved as soon as someone who's an expert reviews that information. And lastly, I have a recommendation for you. At one point in your thesis, if you have to address freedom of expression and how this coexists with freedom of communication, this really draws my attention because this is in my book. We're all here to speak about our book. I would like to recommend you Victor Vázquez Alonso, a teacher from the university in Seville, who's addressing this in connection with the European Union and how media coverage and social media deal with this right. I would like to repeat my thanks, endless thanks, and congratulations for your work. Yolanda, thanks so much for your very kind words. I think it is really important to address media coverage in classes, in classrooms. I think it is great that law professionals are working on this because at the end of the day, media also dictates what is going to be heard and how audiences address legal topics. This is very important. The training of fact checkers is very much a cross-cutting thing because in press rooms we have people who come from the academia, people who come from different fields. In France, there's a very specific case. There is an organization called Les Soigneurs, which is called legal check. So they have legal checkers. We have professionals who have a legal background and who verify legal aspects. So this is a cross-cutting training or background that they have. However, many of them come from the field of law. Regarding your recommendation, this author, I will keep him into consideration when it comes to my legal framework, my theoretical framework. Sorry. Good afternoon or morning. I don't know. I'm kind of lost. Ignacia from Naris, from the Rey Juan Carlos University. Congratulations. What a wonderful presentation. It's obvious that you are a journalist. That was impressive. I'm sorry, but I have to be skeptical. I'm very skeptic. When it comes to the legislative and the executive and interconnection with freedom of press, I'm always skeptic. We're saying this in social media. Most news are trying to target young people. And we see how news are banned. We have the case of Lou Antiques, who's a lawyer who has many followers. He has over 1 million or 1.5 million followers. And Louis Antique was talking about the judgment of the Constitutional Court on the pandemic, the state of alarm, etc. What did TikTok do? They banned it, and then they do shadowing. They deny that they do this, but they did it. They stopped showing this content for 3 months. So what I'm trying to say is that we have a pretty strong problem when it comes to fact checking because there's censorship. Topics are being censored. We never know why this happens. There are algorithms, and these algorithms are often created outside of our borders, and this involves biases. So I don't know if you considered this in your research. How do you address this? Because it's very alarming. Thank you very much, Ignacio. I think your question is very, very important. I think this doubt should be there because doubt arises discussion, and discussion can help us understand some topics. Fact checkers work in cooperation with digital platforms. There's a fact checking program in Meta. There's another one in TikTok. And the role of fact checkers is not so much about censoring content, that's not their competence. Their role has more to do with having a tab there that says, this has been challenged, and this is the verification. You can check the wrong content, and you can check what external checkers have considered that this is false by checking external sources. Regarding the role of platforms, I think they should adhere to the European Union regulation. That's why there's so much emphasis on transparency, how they work, so that bad practices are not implemented. Fact checkers are the opposite to censorship. And the goal is not to ban content because the public should be capable of accessing information, because otherwise we would be going against the right to information. It's not about censoring, it's about providing a contrasted information that is not available in social media. I think in this sense, the European Union emphasizes the responsibility of platforms for them to play this role. We would have to analyze the case that you're mentioning, how or in based on which or what was the reason why this content was banned. I will be quick. My name is Rocío. I want to emphasize what my colleague said. Thank you very much. This was incredible. As Yolanda was saying, I was absolutely in awe with you and your presentation. But I am curious, are you familiar with what member state is more reluctant, or what member state may challenge this expansion of fact checking? Thank you very much. Thanks, Irene. There are governments in the European Union that are, in a way, putting pressure on fact checkers. Indeed, very recently, the EFCN published a press release against the pressures that the government of Hungary was putting on the work of fact checkers. And this is important because if these organizations are suffering, like Georgia and other countries are also suffering these pressures. And there's also pressure from within our borders. We have to wonder why this is happening, and we have to um, give visibility to the role of fact checkers. Before we were talking about the European Fact Checking Standard Network, EF.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, what you say, it is a well-defined research project, but what you say, it's only a partial, let's say, truth about what is going on, because what you have to understand is the European Union, when you observe this kind of policies and objectives that are formed, you have to understand that these are always reactive, not proactive. So there is a problem and there is a policy solution and there is a set of very beautiful objectives, resilient societies, resilient democracies, etc., that translate in different number of funding proposals, funding instruments, policies, strategies, blah, blah, blah. You can go until the end of the time with the paperwork, with the paper trail. When it comes to the implementation, it is where you see the issues. So you connect the problem with the problem also of implementation. So what happened? It happened Cambridge Analytica. It happened the Facebook hearings in the European Parliament. Do you know how many fact checkers Facebook has for entire Europe? 25. And they sit in Uppsala, where they have research data center. 25 fact checkers. And I don't think they're even working now, because since now with the Trump administration, and Zuckerberg made it very clear, it's not his job to deal with this kind of business. And when you put this kind of reality, that there is no space for the mediation, who is going to mediate on Facebook if there are no fact checkers, and you apply this to the conspiracy theories, with the rise of hate, with terrorism, fake information, etc., what the European Union can do is very limited, very, very limited. And there are a number of different kind of serious international projects, many of them in Spain and in Portugal as well, that are trying to address this issue. But it's very complex, and it doesn't paint a nice picture. So there are many, many, many problems. And what is important, as I said in the beginning, is that everything that the EU does on this topic is reactive and not proactive. So they are not really thinking about the future, because if they are thinking about the future, they would invest more in the AI research, in AI evaluation tools, in fact-checking, etc. But everything is very slow. So even if you have good results, research results from your project, from other projects, from practice on fact-checking and verification of data, it will take 2 years to adopt those kind of recommendations. So this is kind of a different kind of reality. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. I am deeply, I really know what you're talking, because the thing of Mark Zuckerberg changed absolutely the scenario of fact-checking in the whole world. They stopped working with Meta in the United States, and we don't know if it's going to be implemented also in 2026 in Europe. And what Europe said about mitigating the systematic risks that makes the disinformation is to do something, and they can do something with community nodes. So community nodes is the way that I'm seeing that they are trying to implement. They have done in the US, they are going to do probably in Europe, and they are putting away fact checkers. And for for Europe, that's okay, because they just have to do something. And the code of conduct that I mentioned is just voluntary. That's absolutely a problem, the thing that's reactive, because I've heard, I don't know who told me, but the regulation always come late, because
on that note, it just like crossed my mind what I was thinking before. So this is concerning the online world. In the offline world, there is another problem of fact-checking when it comes to the EU policymakers themselves. If you look at the members of the European Parliament, they are very, very much not informed about history, and themselves in the European Parliament sometimes disseminate lies, historical revisionism. I mean, it's not uncommon, and they use symbols, fascist symbols, etc., etc. It's a very small group. So how do you also, as a legislator, as European Parliament, penalize a member of the European Parliament? You know that there were only 2 or 3 instances of cases that people, like only recently, were supposed to pay the fine because they promoted hate, intolerance, calling women stupid, saying that Hitler did well, etc., etc. So what about this kind of disinformation? What about fact-checking in the real world? What is the role of researchers, of historians in promoting truth nowadays?
well, that's what I see in the online world, and I hope it have impact in the offline world. I would love to be a jurist to answer your question, but I'm just a journalist, and I would love to know the answer, and I would love to know what experts think that the EU can do for those problems that absolutely affect our democracies. I think that fact checkers have an impact in the offline world, but I'm also concerned that not everyone knows what fact-checking is, what fact-checking do, and there's also something that they have to promote their own image more, I mean, their own image, not only for academics, but also for the public.
You have distinguished what concerns political life, and in political life, you lie. So it's not the subject. No, because it's not the subject. You have rules, you have laws. Some subjects are regulated, but others no, and we have not to over-regulate it, that kind of, because political life is dead. First. Second, it's very difficult. We can do nothing, etc., etc. For me, it's exactly the discourse you have not to tell. Yes, it's difficult, but it's possible to do something. And if you say it's difficult, it's difficult, it's difficult, you discourage people, and you give argument to people that want to do nothing. So you have to encourage, and you have to try to make, well, part of. I am sure also that national states in some fields are able to work together in very crucial fields. I am sure. So it's not only European bureaucracy.
Bien, Armando Santana de la Universidad de Jaén.
Armando Santana from the University of Jaén. I wanted to speak one of them in the first place, but I see how many people were faster than me. When you do things right, others have to say it. I sat down here to sit and listen to your presentation, and the setting was almost perfect. You have these arches, these columns, the greenery in the back, the water in the background. The setting was perfect, but you added that musicality with your presentation, and it was spectacular. And the thing is that lawyers, since we start studying first year law school, and please correct me if I'm wrong, we hear that in law, the the setting is almost as important as the merits or the background. Your presentation is one of the best that I have ever heard. This I'm going to make a question to continue the discussion. I don't want to be accused of having stopped the discussion. In line with what Nacho was saying, my question is very simple, but it may seem simple, but it's not as simple. And if it's simple, better for you. So much better for you. So, who checks checkers? I'll leave it there. Armando, thank you very much for your words. It is a great honor coming from you. All of you, I really admire. I feel so lucky to be here surrounded by these amazing professionals. So your words mean a lot. Yes, as the words of other colleagues. I love your question. Just as Nacho's question, it is important to know about fact checkers. Fact-checking organizations that are part of these associations that I mentioned, like the case of EFCSN, they share some criteria that I verified by external independent members of academia. It's the way it is done, a peer review. It's very similar to peer review in sciences. In order to join these associations and have this equality seal, because that's what I look at when I check this source of information. You need rigor, being transparent, and meeting a series of specific requirements that make you eligible for these organizations. This certification is renewed every 2 years, so the commitment must be ongoing. And I would like to highlight the role of these associations because there's a problem. Anyone can be a journalist or a checker because you feel that you're on social media and you can be a journalist. Well, there are external organisms that are not funded by governments and that assess who does a good job. The fact that there's a standardization, the fact that, for example, there's a checker from Belarus and they need to comply with the same standards as others. Someone mentioned my question before I did. I want to start by congratulating you because you had 1 minute. In 1 minute, you had captured our attention. You have amazing presence on stage. But beyond that, what's more important, you have a great education. You were trying to let us know that you just started with your research, and that's incredible. We can't believe that you just started your research. It's not to be believed. And then I have a question or a comment. When I start studying, like when I teach introduction to law, I try to bring paper clippings and bring the media to the debate. And I try to share ideas, for example, about who should govern, why people should govern, issues around motions of censure. Sometimes the government that doesn't allow a motion of censure or vote of no confidence. So I try to raise discussion about this. For example, I want to raise discussion, for example, is this government illegitimate? Did it have the highest amount of votes? And then I try to ask my students, have you read the law? Why do we make these decisions? Have you read the newspapers? And I see that my students repeat what they read. So I think that facts in newspapers need to be reliable. The truth should be sought for. And that's my first comment. And in connection with this, I have a doubt. We are talking about fact-checking agencies that need to overcome very strict filters. And I have a doubt. Okay. Let's think of organizations like Greenpeace when they issue certain reports, and those reports often contradict reports from other organizations that are very relevant. What should be the filter that I respect? The filter of organization that is going to seek the truth because that's their objective? Or should I respect the filters of another organization that is supposed to be seeking the truth, but that has political or economic interests that are stronger? So that's where I have a doubt. We are talking about very similar topics, maybe, but here we're talking about a fact-checking organization. It may have controls in place, but there may be other aspects that come into play. Thank you very much, Will, for bringing this. I think the media often publishes things that are not wrong, that are not right, but it may be due to precariousness. In Spain and in other countries, the situation of journalists is precarious. We are asked to act and work very fast. And what we have to defend here is to have good quality journalism. That's what the EU is trying to achieve with these regulations and norms. But good practices are not always possible because the conditions are not always possible. I don't justify that lack of precision, but often the pace that journalists have to work at often don't make it possible to dedicate the necessary time. I believe in slow journalism, but institutions should also believe in a calm type of journalism so that society can deserve the information it deserves. Regarding your second question about the bias of checkers, I think it is important to mention that checkers are based on sources and sources are public. It's like science, the science that we could replicate. We can always go to the original source. That's what they use for checking and verifying content. So verifiers that are registered with the EFCSN have to follow some principles, like not depending too much on certain funding sources to be as fair as possible. But total truth does not exist. Um, and checkers, this affects checkers, but it affects journalists too. We should always contrast information. I must also say that fact checkers have channels through which citizens can make consultations and they try to answer with verified facts. They have WhatsApp channels that we can check. And when fact checkers cannot establish whether information is true or untrue, they write a report that is called "What do we know about this topic?" and everything is explained. This is interesting, but however, it is always important to question everything and not take anything, not take any organization as if they are the alpha and omega of anything. Thank you, Rocío, for your presentation. I wanted to I wanted to make my contribution. Yesterday, an AI called Justitio was launched. I was checking this artificial intelligence. I didn't have that much time because I was preparing my presentation, but I was checking this AI tool and it summarizes the uh, official bulletin in Spain based on questions. And you can adapt your level of questions. For example, you have a teenage level, adult level, and you can specify what kind of information you want. The Spanish official bulletin publishes over 10,000 pages a day. The Spanish official bulletin. I would like to fact check this fact. Sorry. This fact came from a public institution, so I should believe it. So my question is, we have tools like this, and echoing what Raquel was saying, we have these tools. They can be very useful when it comes to like not creating public opinion. I may just want to get information service, but this information may be useful to check. Indeed, platforms use these tools very often. How, what's the situation with regards to this, and how do these connect to manual journalists? How do fact checkers feel about this potential support? I use this type of resources, and I'm a journalist myself, but I'm not blind. I feel that often, I may regret having said this because it's being recorded. Often these tools are better than what a human would do. I was very shocked. And these technologies in an initial stage. But what do journalists who fact check, what do we do? I think what do we do? We benefit from it because this information is circulating so fast, and artificial intelligence and democratization of AI has so many advantages as disadvantages. And we have seen this. AI can lie blatantly. And it is thanks to these tools that verifiers or fact checkers can fact check faster. As Enrique was saying, um, we need that speed that we can get through AI, but we need to check it. We need to filter it humanly. We can't leave AI by itself because it is based on what we believe and we make mistakes.
Ese doble par ciego.
So it has to be a double-blinded peer. We have to verify what the artificial intelligence does. For example, full fact based in the UK uses artificial intelligence, and we have to either use it or it will totally devastate us. So a few days ago, when you said that you were only 2 years older than your students and that was weird, I can only think how lucky your students are, because this discipline is being degraded by people who call themselves journalists without being such a thing. And so thank you for the advice you give to your students. And thank you for recommending everyone to use the official gazette. That is something everybody should read. And then I have the first thing I think is what will happen if somebody says, okay, I want to be a fact checker. And then fact checking can create some misinformation and create a chain of fake news, because that is like putting a patch into something instead of solving it from scratch, like solving the root cause. Instead of having so much fact checking, people should be better educated so that they wouldn't need fact checking in the first place. Okay, so yeah, you can reply. And okay, one more question. And that's it, because we have to close like in 30 seconds. I totally doubt artificial intelligence will be the final thing, because we will always need human beings. Artificial intelligence have many applications, many developments, but a dual assessment or a dual peer review, I don't know if that will be possible. We have to accept that artificial intelligence will have to incorporate a double fact checking, because sometimes human beings will not be able to identify the mistakes committed, the mistakes made by artificial intelligence. So yes, artificial intelligence will never be replaced, will never replace human beings. Yes, of course, we cannot place legitimacy on the media or a person disseminating information just because they are disseminating information. We should never trust blindly fact checkers just because they're fact checkers. Of course, we need critical thinking. We need to be aware of what is true and what is false. And regarding artificial intelligence, of course, we can learn from it, but it also includes mistakes. Mistakes coming from us because we created it. We can learn from it. We cannot leave it aside. We cannot avoid it. So it has to be included in our work in an ethical way. We need to work. We need to.
So thank you very much. It was a fascinating session. And to write a good thesis, you have to be able to take some risks. If you follow methodology, write a quite classical book, no. You have the opportunity to take some risk and to publish something very interesting and useful.
Thank you very much for everything to everything.